Hi art nerds, happy holidays. So in part 1 of this video, I promised to show you how to assemble and pose the candy cane thief, and I'm here to do just that. If you're new to the paper child concept, check out part 1 linked in the description below. I'll also have some paper child tutorials. So the materials you're going to need to assemble this little cutie are pretty straightforward. You're going to want some popsicle sticks, some foam tape, some double stick tape, some regular tape. I have a tape runner as well. I also have an XActo knife and a pair of scissors. You really don't need the tape runner though. Double stick tape and regular tape will work just fine. And you can get the popsicle sticks and the foam tape at Dollar Tree. I'm also using some nickels as a counterbalance. So here's a little peek from part 1 of this tutorial where I watercolored this illustration. So if you'd like to try your hand at watercolor, you can check out part 1. I'm also going to have links in the description below where you can print out both the line art of this paper child as well as the watercolor illustration. I recommend if you're printing out either you're printing them on heavier paper like cardstock or 90-pound paper. I'll have some suggestions down in the description as well as the materials you'll need for this part of the tutorial. So here are the materials that I'm going to be using all laid out. You're also going to want to keep the excess paper. So the first step is to cut out your paper child. Now what I want is as many long straight edges of paper as possible. So to achieve that, I'm going to use a paper cutter. You don't have to use a paper cutter for this. I'm just terrible at cutting straight lines. You could use a ruler and your scissors. You could use a ruler and an X-Acto blade. Whatever you have will work pretty well for this. Now, if you're one of my younger viewers, I highly recommend you do this activity with a parent, a guardian, an older sibling, a grandparent, just somebody who's old enough to use scissors without supervision. I also recommend you complete this project under supervision because we are dealing with sharp things. So I want you to set aside these large blocks of paper. You're going to need them later. It's also handy to hold on to some of the larger, smaller scraps, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put these aside so they don't get damaged. And I'm going to use my scissors to cut off the excess paper. So you see, I'm setting aside those larger chunks. Those are definitely going to come in handy later. Then I'm using my X-Acto blade to cut the fine areas that are a little bit more difficult to get into with a pair of scissors. You can use a really small pair of needle nose scissors though to get into those fine areas. I don't own a pair, so I'm going to use an X-Acto blade for this. And I'm cutting on the back of my sketchbook, so I'm using the chipboard back of my surface of my sketchbook as a cutting mat, but you can use an actual cutting mat or some scrap cardboard. You just want to make sure you're not cutting directly on your tabletop. You could damage your tabletop, and that would be a big problem, right? So now that I've done all the fussy cutting, I'm using a large pair of scissors designed for paper to cut out my paper child. Now, in part 1, I said I was going to do what's known as a halo cut. That's where you cut around whatever you're cutting out, leaving a halo of the white paper. That would also work for this, but I kind of forgot myself when I was using the X-Acto blade, and I did what's known as fussy cutting, where you're cutting along that line art edge. You can do whichever you're comfortable with, but if you're not particularly good with scissors, I would recommend you do the halo cut. It's much easier and it'll be much quicker. Now that Kara's mostly cut out, all that's left is to cut out her arms, and I'm going to use the scissors for this. So in part 1, you guys probably noticed that I painted her arms detached from her body. That's to allow for her to hold a candy cane, since this is the candy cane thief. And if you guys are not familiar with this character, this is my character Kara. She's a 7-inch tall little girl, and she's from my comic 7-inch Kara. I'll have a link down in the description below. Volume 1 is already out in print and available to purchase, and Volume 2 is available for pre-order, and I'm really excited that we are probably going to have Volume 2 out to Kickstarter backers for Christmas. If you're looking for a charming tale of family and friendship, I highly recommend you check out 7-inch Kara. So now that everything's cut out, I'm practicing different poses with the arms, and I grabbed the candy cane that I'm going to use later just to practice with. So this is foam tape. I picked it up at Dollar Tree, and it is double-sided tape that has a little bit of foam in the center. And what's cool about this is it basically lifts the two things you're taping together about 1 millimeter. You can stack your foam tape as well to get a thicker width if you need it. Now we're going to use a little bit of the foam tape here on her arms so that they're a little bit three-dimensional from her body, and that's going to allow, or better allow, for her to hold the candy cane. And I'm practicing different placements because once you have these taped down, you're not going to be able to remove them and tape them again. So you want to be sure about what you're doing. So now I've placed the tape. And I'm removing the second layer of protection from the tape. I've placed the candy cane, and now I'm placing the arms. So this is the position that the arms are going to be in until this paper child basically falls apart. So next I'm using some of the double-sided tape to tape the candy cane into her arms. If you decide that you want to eat your candy cane, maybe don't tape it into her arms. There might be a better way to secure the candy cane to Kara without ruining the paper child, but if you printed this out, that might not bother you so much. Okay, so now that she's got her candy cane, I'm going to use our popsicle sticks to provide some support. If you don't have popsicle sticks, that's fine. You can use like actual sticks from the yard if you want, or you can cut pieces of paper. What we're using this for is to provide support because that candy cane is heavy, and even though I painted this on 180-pound watercolor paper, which is a very thick watercolor paper, it still might be prone to flopping over from the weight of the candy cane. So I'm using the popsicle sticks to provide a lot of support. And I'm applying double stick tape along the length of the popsicle stick so it'll stick to the paper child. I'm trying to avoid using glue here because glue adds moisture, and moisture can cause paper to warp. When necessary, I also cut my popsicle sticks down to size. Now, this is another great opportunity to get some help from someone older and a little bit more adept with scissors. I don't want anybody getting hurt on my watch. I'm also going to glue or tape a popsicle stick going down her spine basically, and that's going to give her some back support so she can really hold that candy cane. And this could be a great activity for a parent and child to do together. The kiddo can color the paper child, and then the parent can cut it out and assemble it. Okay, now we've got some good back support going on. It's time for us to build the base and to trim off any excess paper that we may have forgotten to get on the first go. So we're going to build a triangular base using the scraps that we saved. So I'm starting by creating a base for her feet. Now, you need some sort of base because she's really not going to be able to stand up on her own. And the larger a base you build, the sturdier your paper child is going to be. So I'm using some double stick tape to tape her feet down to our paper base. And this is the same paper that she was painted on. So it's the same thickness, it's the same rigidity. You may decide though that you want to use some old cereal boxes to create the support that you need. That's a great sturdy paper that's still relatively easy to cut. What you could also do is print out your paper child and then glue it to your chipboard or your cereal box, or you could color your own and then glue that and then cut around it after it's fully dried. So I realized I need some more ankle support for Kara. She might flop over at that weak point. So designing paper children, doing paper engineering is all about figuring out the weak parts. And I usually do a lot of my engineering while I'm assembling them. So there's going to be a lot of trial, error, and experimentation. It's okay if your first attempt doesn't go so well. Try again. So I recommend that you print out the colored version of this and practice assembling that. And then you can design your own, or then you can color your own. I'm also attaching another chunk of popsicle stick that's been cut at the joint between the two popsicle sticks for additional stability. So now it's time to build the triangular base. And the way I want to do that for the front is I'm basically making a paper sandwich. So I've marked where the front half of the base is, and then I'm going to fold the two sides. And I'm also going to use the foam tape because it's going to accommodate the popsicle sticks that we included in the center, so it's more likely to stay stuck together, if you know what I mean, because everything is basically the same width. And like I said, you can get the foam tape over at Dollar Tree. It's 3 rolls for $1, so it's very inexpensive. If you don't have foam tape, you can also loop over like masking tape just to give it some additional width. All right, now I'm taping my paper sandwich together. And I'm pressing hard where the foam tape is to make sure it adheres. So I need to make this a triangular base, and it's not really long enough. So I measured my other 2 pieces of paper and I cut them until they're the same width as that first piece of paper. And now I'm using my tape runner to stick it to the first piece. You don't have to use a tape runner for this. You can use a glue stick and clamp it together until it dries, or you can use double stick tape, or you can use single-sided tape folded over so that it has 2 sticky surfaces. Basically, use what you've got. Would you guys believe when I was in school, I used to get in trouble in the paper center, which was intended for writing letters and practicing your handwriting. I used to get in trouble all the time for making paper contraptions just like this one here. All right, so I added a little bit of extra paper and folded it over and attached it on both sides. Then I used some single-sided tape wrapped around those joins on both sides to give it some additional stability. I realized that this paper child is very prone to pulling that paper sandwich that we made for the front apart. So I'm cutting another piece of foam tape to stick in the middle there just to provide a little bit of extra adhesion and to keep it from falling apart. That candy cane is heavy. You know, people have commented that Lilliputians must be incredibly strong to hold and carry some of the things they hold and carry. So now I'm using some single stick tape just to tape my paper sandwich together. I didn't want to cover Kara's foot because this is glossy single-sided tape, but if you have the matte single-sided tape, if you run your finger or your nail across it so that it really sticks to the paper, it's going to be basically invisible. It's not going to be noticeable. The glossy tape is a lot more noticeable though, and I just couldn't be having with that. All right, so we have the basics of our triangular base assembled. I'm just taping the other side, and then I'm going to put a piece of tape going all the way around in the middle. And now I'm going to build the sturdy part of the base. This is basically the foot of the base. So I have this scrap triangle that I saved. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to make a template using my pencil of what the base actually looks like. Originally, I was going to cut that excess off, but I realized that if I fold that excess up, it's going to create an even more sturdy base. And then I just trimmed off the little bit of excess there. And I'm going to tape this on the far side of the triangle. And this is going to work really well because it's going to provide counterbalance for that candy cane, and I can put my weights in the base. So I folded it up and I used the tape runner to apply a little adhesive. And that's not really going to be strong enough. So I'm going to wrap some tape around it just to give it some extra strength. And this is more than just a paper project. This is a full-on craft project. It's just a craft project using a lot of paper. I'm also cutting the tape and applying it to the popsicle sticks just so that they adhere to the base a little bit better, and that's going to prevent her from bending and flopping over. I might over-engineer my paper children. I still have the paper children that I used when recording the Kickstarter video, and they're still pretty dang sturdy. So you can see I'm wrapping the tape from the inside, going along the sides, making sure that it makes really good contact with the sides, and then down to the bottom. And this is going to give us a really sturdy base. I'm also going to put a piece of tape and wrap it along the pointed end of our triangle. I don't know whether to call that the base or the tip. From this orientation, I mean. Adding even more tape to the popsicle sticks. Gotta make sure they're nice and sturdy. If you have it, you can also run some white masking tape on top of the popsicle sticks along the back just to give it some additional stability. Alright, time for some coinage. If you don't have coins laying around or you can't spare the coins, you can use paper clips, you can use pebbles, you could use small sticks, you can use anything that has just a little bit of heft or weight to it. You could even fill the base with candy if you really want to do that. I think the candy cane is enough candy for Kara, so I'm going to use nickels, and I've selected 3 nickels, and I've made 3 piles with 3 nickels each, and those are going to be the weights that are going to counterbalance our candy cane. So I'm wrapping my nickels with tape so that they all stay together, and then I'm going to tape that into the base. One at the point of the base, and then one on each side of that point. So I use some double stick tape to stick my nickels into the base. And I'm just going to repeat that. And basically, our paper child is done. All that's really left is to pose it. So the more you practice paper engineering, the more you build things like this, the easier it's going to get and the more ideas you're going to have. I think designing two-dimensional characters that can then exist in the three-dimensional world is a lot of fun. I tend to get carried away when it comes to designing paper children. So now it's time to place this paper child amongst my Christmas display. So to hide that white base, I'm just going to use some ornaments and just kind of carefully and artfully place them in front of her so the base isn't so noticeable, and so it actually looks like she stole a candy cane and is sneaking away. Try to spot her in some of the chill streams that I have coming up for the rest of December. Knowing me, she'll probably still be there in March. So I have a whole bunch more Christmas-inspired paper children for you to print, color, cut, and assemble. I can't wait to share them with you guys, so I hope you guys will keep checking every day for even more tutorials. The line art and the finished colored piece are free for you to print, but if you enjoy the work I do and you're able to, your support on Patreon would mean a lot. You can find me at patreon.com/natosoup. So I had a blast coloring, cutting, and assembling this paper child. I'm really looking forward to some of the other fun designs I have coming up really soon. If you like this video, leave me a big old thumbs up. And if you know of someone else who would enjoy this video, please do me a huge favor and share this with them. So happy holidays, guys. Bye.